released yet, but it's only just minor changes. But 758 is all the features that you can get on 758 are on this one. Just I've got some additional features because I've got a new version that I'm testing. So is we can either add in a blank panel and start from scratch, or we can take a download from an existing site. And you would have to use some of these icons to start the programming procedure. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you how you can create a site up from scratch. So if we didn't have the panel on site, a customer has told us the details and we want to start the program before the actual panel's been actually created and sent across to us before the install's taking place. And how we do that is we use the first icon that's appeared. And you can see that on the screen now, you'll see there's a little image of a panel with a little plus symbol on there. This icon, if I hover over it, will say add product. If this icon is ever selected, what will happen is it will come up in the center of the page with all the different protocols that we manufacture. Within these protocols, what we can do is we can open them up by pressing the little plus icon, and it lists out all the panels that we have under that specific protocol. What we said yesterday was the configuration tool, just like any of the other products that we manufacture, is backwards compatible. So it works on both the Pro 4s and the Pro 5 range of products. What we also discussed yesterday is remember that we can use both Pro 4s and Pro 5s on the same network as well. So we could have a mix and match of all these different products if need be to cover our full site. And there would be no issue with that as long as the same network card was installed throughout. What you'll see currently though, is I'm currently programming panel 1 on my site. So because I'm programming the first panel on my network, you can see if I go through these options, it only gives me the option to add in a main panel. There's no such thing as repeaters. There's no such thing as BMSs. There's no such thing as IP gateways at this current time. Can anyone remember why the repeaters and everything like that aren't currently on this section if I'm programming node 1? Can anyone remember that from yesterday's course?
Master panel?
It is the master panel, but the reason why it has to be a main panel.
With loops.
Yeah, and I've had a few of the messages come through and everything like that, and it looks like everyone's on the right track. The reason is the main panel has to be on node 1 has to be a loop-based product. And yes, it has to be a main panel, but the reason for that is the node 1 on the system is the controller of the time and dates across the site. And only a loop-based product can send that sort of information across all the panels on site. So if I had made something like a repeater panel or an IP gateway or something along those lines, node 1, if I changed the time and date on that product, I would have to change the time on absolutely every panel on site. Whereas if I had a loop-based product as node 1, soon as I change the time and date of my particular product, what that'll then do is send the information from there to the rest of the site. And I would only need to ever change it on that first panel. The one thing that I will say is, and like I said, if you take into consideration some of them sites that we were discussing yesterday, we were saying that some of the sites that we work with have up to 194 panels on there. Can you imagine having to go through 194 panels to just change the time and date? It doesn't seem feasible. It would take a ridiculous amount of time. So that's why the main panel has to be node 1, and we would always recommend make sure that the node 1 on your system is a loop-based product. From then on in, by all means, you can set any other node from 2 onwards to be what is an MX5100 LS panel is. And it's a specialist panel that we manufacture that had only certain elements. You'll probably find that it's probably been sort of replaced in the last few months, because for some of the guys that aren't aware, we've now got the Go panel. But it was a similar sort of concept to the Go panel, where we removed certain features of the panel to make it a little bit cheaper. But the Go panel's now replaced that, and the Go panel again has had further features removed and then made it even cheaper again. So that's what the 5100S, and you'll find that there's a 4100S as well, which both panels are called Solisto panels. And you might have seen them on some of your sites, but we don't sell them on a regular basis, but can be accessed on site. What you'll find is the main panels that you'll see is the 1 to 4 loops on both products. And the idea is once you come into this section, if you want to add the panel in, it's just as simple of just highlighting the panel that you want to add in. So I just want to add this 4 loop, change the name if need be, and then simply press OK. As soon as we click OK on this option, what it does is it adds the product that I've currently selected straight into my site list. And you can see my product is now installed. Now that I've got something to program, what happens is my new additional icons now appear, because now I can start to do some cause and effect on the particular product that I've highlighted. One thing that we discussed yesterday, but we didn't put into theory, was what I told you guys was, if I've got a networked system, what I would always recommend is to make sure that the site list has got every single product from across the network installed in it. And why I said that was the actual software, if we've got a download of all the products on the one site list, it allows the software to confirm that everything is correct. And it also allows the panel to check that there's actually no errors that's going to conflict amongst these panels. So a common issue that you could potentially have on some of your sites is duplicated zones. So what we said yesterday was you can't have the same zone used on more than one panel. If you've got a duplication of zones, what that'll do is it'll prevent the information from being able to transfer it from one panel to another, which potentially could put people's lives at risk. And the software is intelligent enough to look through your program, assess the situation, and make sure that before you send the information back to the panels, that there is no conflictions back and forward. Whereas if you had a separate site file for every one of your panels on site, it's got nothing to compare against. So it's easy to make mistakes in that sort of scenario. So like I said, what I would do in this sort of scenario, if I've got a multi-panel network, all I would do is I would continue to add my products in. And you'll see this time, because I've added in node 2, which is the second node on the line, you see I don't just get my standard panels that we've got at the top here. We've now got a new section, which is your network peripherals, which includes all them different products that we discussed, like the repeater panels, like the IP gateways and the mimics and the BMSs and all these different features that can't be node 1, but there's no reason why it can't be anything beyond that. And again, to simply add them in, you highlight the product, you choose what the name is and what the node number is, and just simply press OK. And it will add the product in, storing it straight into the site list, allowing you to add the products and program it from then on in. Everyone okay with that part so far? We know how.
Yeah. What's the IP gateway for?
The IP gateway is a node reference on our panel, which allows remote dialing. What it does is it sits on your network.
Yeah.
It's got its own information, so it receives the data from all the different panels on site. And what it allows you to do is to dial into that product and see exactly what's going on site. So it'll tell
you say dial in, does that on a normal phone line or internet?
Yeah, just on the internet. So it's got its own IP address. So
got you. That's what I'm getting. You don't dial into it anymore, surely. I mean, I did that years ago, but
and the good thing about it is the IP gateway is programmable, so you can actually send like emails to yourself and stuff like that when certain occurrences take place. So it might be, if there's any fault conditions, it can send an email straight to you to say, look, that's been a fault condition, this is the information, and you can dial in and just see exactly what's been going on. But no, it's quite a good product. I know some of the guys got shown it on day one and like the sort of features that's involved. But yeah, it's something that we do manufacture here at Advance. And it's very easy to set up as well. It's just a case of just putting it on the network and just getting the IP address put into place, and it's all done through the dialing.
Okay.
Do you just go on? So I've just had a question there. Does the repeater panels go in the loop address, or is it an extra panel? So a repeater panel is always placed on the network. It never sits on the loop. It sits on the network, just like any of the other panels on site. So even though that it's just repeating the information, it must be just tracked like any other panel. It's given its own network address, and it's just tracked like in the same sort of programming where it's given a node number and told what else to look for. So I hope that answers your question, buddy. Right, what I'm now going to show you is, so far I've just showed you how to add in a blank panel, and you'll see if when we look at these panels, they're completely blank. There's no devices installed, there's no programming involved. We would have to start it from scratch. But 9 times out of 10, what you guys will probably be doing is getting your panel on site, you'll be adding the devices to the product, and then you'll be taking a download. So at least a lot of the information's already been put into place. And that's what I'm going to show you next. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start a new site file. I don't want to have the information that I've currently got here. I want to start a new one. And you can see I've still got them 3 icons across the top. And the next 2 icons is what we need to use to allow the next form of communications. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that our PC software is told how to communicate with our panels. And what we discussed yesterday was there's 2 communications ports on the Pro 5s. That's the RS-232 and there's the direct USB. The first thing that we need to do to allow the communications is install the drivers. The drivers have got to be installed inside inside the PC, so at least it knows it can communicate. One other thing that what I advise you to do is to also check your port settings. And for the guys that weren't on yesterday's course, I'll show you quickly how the port settings are adjusted. So the port settings, what you would need to do is, I'm just going to share the screen instead of just the software. So it should allow you to see my full screen now. And what I told you guys yesterday was once you've installed the drivers, what you can do is you can go to the control panel of your PC. Control panel. Once you're in the control panel, what I said was we can go to the device manager, which is the hardware of our PC. And this is all the hardware items of the PC itself. In there, if you've installed the driver, what you would do is you would go to the ports, which we would need to make a reference to this COM port here, because this is the number that we need to assign to the actual physical software. So what we would do in that sort of aspect is once we've decided which software, which COM port we are using, what we would have to do is we'd need to use one of these icons, which is this one in the center, to set up the COM port that we are using. So this little icon, if I hover over it, will say settings. And if I click into there, what it does is it comes up with all the settings of the software that we are using. We are going to discuss all these different items throughout the course, but the one that I want us to concentrate on first and foremost is the one at the very bottom. And this one is for communications. The communications option is where we select the COM port. And the first thing that we install this software, and the first thing that we're setting up, the first thing that we need to do is to set up the COM port to tell it which COM port we are using to communicate with our panels. And all we need to do is to come into this section and match it up with the COM port. Oh, helps if I click on the right thing. That's been assigned within my device manager. So you can see COM9 matches up with my A10 converter. Perfect. As soon as I've done that, that will store the information within the software itself. So anytime that I open up the software from then on in, it will always reference the COM port that I last selected. So I don't need to keep on changing this every single time. One other thing that I was telling you guys yesterday, and this is for the guys that weren't on yesterday's course, is once you've got the COM port and everything set up, that'll be great. It knows what it's going to communicate with. But at times you might find that although that you've got the COM port and the driver installed, what you might find is at times it might lose communications partway through the downloads and uploads to the panels. The reason for that is it's all down to what the port settings are on this particular port. So what I can do is I can go into the properties of this COM port, and the option that we discussed yesterday was the port settings. What we said was, as soon as you install a driver inside these panels, is what happens is, even though that you're installing a specific driver, the PC takes control, and it assumes that you're installing these drivers to communicate to their equipment. So their equipment includes things like printers, fax machines, things of that nature that are a Windows-based product, which these sort of products don't need a lot of information to do the job. However, what we're doing is we're communicating with intelligent fire alarm systems, which has got a lot of information involved. And our products work at a baud rate of 38,400. If you leave it on the default 9600, what that means is your PC is going to work a lot slower than what's currently set up on my current PC. And what I said yesterday was, if the PC and the panel start communicating and sending information, what happens is the panel will be working a lot quicker than your actual PC is. And because the panel sends so much information at a much quicker rate, what happens is the information at the PC side starts to bottleneck. And if it starts to bottleneck, at times the PC can eventually just go, look, that's too much information. I can't cope with this at this moment. Can you just slow it down or stop the communications while I catch up? But as soon as it cuts off the communications, what happens then is it's lost comms with the panel. And then from in, it's then going to say that there's a loss of communications taking place. Like I said, you can sometimes get away with some of the smaller panels and everything like that with the baud rate of 9600. And you might find that sometimes it might take 5 or 6 times for the actual information to come through. And yes, sometimes it may work. But if you want to make sure that it's not only consistent, but also a lot quicker, all you would need to do is come into this particular section and adjust the baud rate to match up with your actual PC. And all you do is you would select 38,400 and click OK on this particular section. And that will.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this record button on the bottom, so I could have recorded that section. It says I need to get your permission.
Nothing's come through yet.
I pressed record. Right, please ask host to give permission. Then it just says close. Don't say anything else.
No notification came through. The good thing is, anyway, I do have documents on it, so I'll certainly send them across, because I promised all the guys that were on yesterday's course, I'll send through all the presentations which notifies this. But I've also got a document on this particular section as well, so I'll send that across to you if you want, Mark.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll send it all through to you. But yeah, like I said, 38,400 is normally what we would recommend, and a lot of people forget about that. But yeah, what you might find, as soon as you set up as 38,400, and my PC is one of these, as soon as I change it, I click OK, it's going to ask me to reboot my PC, but it's all down to what the certain PCs you're using. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it on 9600 for the purpose of this course, because I don't want to have to get you guys all back on the course again for just showing you the speeds and everything like that. But you get the question come in saying, will the Pro 4s ever been updated to accept USB? I've got to be honest with you, there'll be no further updates on a Pro 4. There'll be no hardware updates. And that's certain, and there won't be any firmware updates either. That's as far as the Pro 4s are getting, because that's now our older products. So
I've got a system on Monday, which I might have to give somebody a call about anyway. And
yeah.
I'll be given a Apollo Discovery down the beacon base to add to an existing system. Is it, could I encounter any possible compatibility issues with what's available in the config when I get to site, or will it prove work?
Discovery and everything will be supported on every one of our products. Is the current reference of the programming that's being used on this particular panel. If there's been any changes on either side, that number will then adjust. So that means it covers your back to see if anyone's been adjusting anything on the panel. But again, Michael would have showed you where that option is on your panel on day one. But that's just giving us a little bit of information on the panel that we are communicating with. And then you'll see that the green dot will constantly go back and forward to show that there's actually communications. What you'll find is, even though that we are communicating with the panel, it won't do anything beyond that until we give it another command. And what we need to do is, if we are wanting to take a download from a panel, what we need to do is we need to make sure that the communications are taking place. And once the communications is taking place, we then go to the option top left, which will say File. If the File option is ever selected, what you'll find is you'll then have an option which will say Transfer from Panel to PC. If you select any icon across the top, you get the further icons on the row below. So because I've clicked the communications icon, these are the details of the icon that I've selected. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use this little icon on the left-hand side, which is the stop communications option. And you can see if I've stopped the communication and click that file option, you can see there's no option to take a download. So if I click that option again, you see I've got the comms going back and forward, and I get the option to transfer from panel to PC. If that option is selected, and if there's no current program, because this is just, there's not a lot on this panel, there's some devices, but it's certainly not on a network or anything like that. So because it's not on a network, what happens is the software then asks us the question. This isn't, so it's telling us this currently isn't on a network, but would you like it to be on a network or not? So the question asks us, is it a standalone panel? So if it's a standalone panel, I can click yes, and it'll continue to treat it as a standalone panel. If this is now going to be part of a network, what I can do is I can click the no icon, which not only gives me the information to add in text for the panel itself, but it'll also ask me the question of what node number I would like this to be. And the idea is all I do is I type in whatever panel I want, a text I want it to have. So I'm just going to call it panel 1. I give it the node number that I want to give it to assign it, and I simply just click OK. And as soon as the OK option has been selected, what it does, it goes through all the different elements of the panel, collecting all the necessary data along the way. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit slower because it's not set, because my PC is still currently set up as 9600, but it's no slow coach. It's going to go through pretty quickly because there's not a lot of information here. If this had been a for loop with a lot of devices on there and a lot of information involved, it's certainly going to take a lot longer. But it also could be potentially, because I've got it set up for 9600 still, could have potentially lost communications as well. So that's one of the main reasons why we adjust the COM port. Once the download has been complete, it tells us at the center of the page, it tells us that the overall process has been complete as well. And it'll tell us that we can click done to finalize the download. Soon as we click the done icon, as we can see up here, what it does is it collects that information and it stores it within our site list, just like we seen when we added the products in. The only thing different this time is it's now received the data from the panel. So a lot of the information would have already been filled in for us. So where the blank panel would have been no devices, no nothing, because I've actually taken a download from an existing panel. We're going to go through this in a second. You can see a lot of the information, like the devices, has already been completed for us. And that's what can actually take place.
I have a question.
Certainly,
If I
yeah.
download from a Pro 4 and send it straight to a Pro 5, is there going to be any problems?
It has to match up exactly. So if it doesn't match up exact, it's not going to accept the information because it thinks you're sending the wrong information into the panel. But there is a catch, but there is a change up that you can certainly do. And I'll show you that in a few moments' time when we go through the upload process. But we can convert these panels from 4,000 to 5,000 or from a single loop to a for loop or whatever it may be. So we can certainly do that, Mark. So there's no problem with that.
Okay.
So what we've got so far is we've taken a download from one panel. So before that, I've just had a question through. Someone's just sent me a question saying, if you select that this is a standalone panel when it's on a network, will it cause a problem? So if it's already on a network and I've already given a node number, it won't ask me if it's a standalone panel because it already knows it's part of a network. If I haven't put it on a network node and I haven't given a node number, it will ask me if it's a standalone or not. If I select yes by mistake and I say it's a standalone panel, it is an adjustable feature. So I can certainly change that option if I need to further on when I get into the programming elements. And what we would do is we'd go into that option that we discussed yesterday about the network sector information, and I can adjust the node number in there. Because what you'll find, any standalone panel will be pre-programmed as node 0. Anything that's programmed as node 0 means standalone. If we change that number to be anything else, that means it's part of the network. And we can certainly adjust it on here, or we can adjust it on the panel itself. So there's no further problems if that is ever the case. But so I hope that answers your question. So what I also told you guys before, and certainly yesterday, was if we've got a networked system, what we'd advise is to download the full site on the one configuration file. So currently I've taken a download from my node 1. I've got that first panel on there. But what I now need to do is to take a download from the rest of the panels on site. And what I do to do that is I keep the file open. So I've still got this file open with my node 1 in there. I physically take my PC to the next node on the line and connect it up. And I go through the same process again. So I click the communications icon. I start the communications process. I go to the file option. I go off to the transfer from panel to PC. And I tell it that it's the next node on the line. So this is going to be my node 2, panel 2. And I click OK. And again, it starts the download process, collecting all the information from that particular panel, and again, storing it within my site list. What I will say is, when it comes to downloading your products, you don't necessarily need to do them in order. You can download any panel at any time. And what happens is the software will collect the data, it understands what it's taking a download from, and it'll slide it straight into the designated slot for that particular panel. So if I had a downloaded panel 1 first, or panel 2 or 3 or whatever at first, it doesn't matter. I could have downloaded them in any order, and it will simply just put them straight in the designated slot, as you can see in the top left-hand corner. So
yeah, I have a question. This came from Kentech Synchro problems.
At this current juncture, I would have to say no. You have to go through the panels individually. I'm communicating with these panels, no problem at all. But for me to actually communicate with the panels, you must have the panel in commissioning menu to actually take the download. So what we said yesterday, and what Michael would have discussed with you on day 1, is the commissioning menu, or level 3, as some people refer to it as, is the programming menu. And currently we are using programming software. So unless that panel is in the programming menus of that particular product, I'll not be able to take a download. Remember, there's one of the questions that's come through and saying, could you not put them all in commissioning and take a download in that way? But remember, any panel that's placed in commissioning is temporarily taken off the network. So if it's taking off the net infliction against one another. So what we've got here is we've got our two panels on our network now. Once I've done my programming, I'm happy with everything that I've done. I then want to send the information back to the panel. It's very similar in the concept that we've got to be able to communicate with the product. So once I'm happy with this programming, I highlight the panel that I want to send in. I go to the top left or top right hand corner for the communications icon, and I click this icon again, and it starts the communications. What you'll find is, as I'm communicating, if I go to file, I've still got the option to take a download. It doesn't change to say upload or anything like that. And the reason for that is we've actually put the upload and the download options in two completely separate locations. The reason for that is we're trying to prevent you from making any silly mistakes. We don't want you uploading a blank file to an existing panel. We don't want you downloading over the top of a panel program that you've been taking your time to program through. So we're trying to cover your backs in that sort of scenario. So to help you guys out, what we've done is we've located these two options in two separate locations. And what you'll find now is, now that I've got a panel to program and I've got something to talk with, now when I click the communications icon and I go to these lower row of icons, I now have a new icon to play with. And this lowest row of icons is the further details icon. So yes, I've still got that icon here to lose communications or stop the communications. But the icon that I've now got is a little picture of my PC with a blue arrow pointing up, which if I hover over that, will say transfer data from PC to panel. If this icon is ever selected, this is the icon to send the information back to the panel. So this is the upplace. And what it does is it does something that's referred to as a design check. A design check, what that does is it ensures that everything that I've programmed on this panel is going to not only work, but what it's also going to do is it's going to make sure that it's not going to affect any of the other panels on site. So it's looking for two particular things. It's looking for things that are referred to as warnings. So warnings are things like minor hindrances. It might be a little bit of a pain, but it's not going to put anyone's life at risk. So you can see things like blank text on devices and zones. Yes, it might be a bit of a pain to find out where these devices are, but we know if we get a fire condition, we know that we're still going to evacuate the building.
Quick question. You know, when you get a warning that says, I think it says something like unused zone text, is it something like that comes up? Is that an issue?
This one. So this is what it's got. Yeah, it's just saying that. So it's just saying blank text.
It doesn't matter really.
Or one of the ones is unused output group.
Yeah.
So what we've got is we create output groups. If we don't have a device in it, then it's not being used. So it's just trying to bring it to your attention. Anything that's a warning, it's not going to affect your system. It's just trying to bring it to your attention just in case you've made a mistake. About the program in a bit. But I've just caused an actual physical problem with these panels now. There's a duplication of zones, which we just discussed. If there's a duplication of zones, it could affect the communications between the products. So now if I go through the communications, what happens is it now doesn't just find my warnings. It now also looking for something that's referred to as problems also. And problems aren't just minor hindrances. These are something that's going to potentially put people's lives at risk. Anything that comes up as a problem, what it does is it prevents you from sending the information back to the panel. Because it's saying, look, we're not allowing you to send that in because this is going to put people's lives at risk. We don't want to put anyone in danger. We want to protect them at the end of the day. And if we've got this particular problem in place, we're not going to be able to communicate to everyone, which could potentially put people's life in danger. So in this sort of scenario, we've got to resolve the problems before the upload ever takes place. So this current option is just giving me a basic design check. And you wouldn't necessarily do it as a duplicated zone in that sense, because normally what you would do that for is if you had, like, let's say there was a device that you couldn't find the text for and everything like that on the front of the panel. Yeah. If you couldn't find where that device is, by all means, we can activate the LED on the device, no problem at all. But that would be done in the commissioning menu, in the loops menu, into the view and edit of your loop. And then if you scroll down to your device, so let's say it was a smoke detector in this instance, what you would do is you would just press the tick option on that device and it'll say, do you want to test this device? You're talking about like a remote LED on the panel. Duplicated zone. So what they would have done, because a lot of people believe or fall into the assumption that the standard states that you can only use one zone for the stairwells. It's never the case. It never has been the case. What the standard states is that it has to be separate from the rest of the site. So what they would have done in that sort of instance, if there's two panels communicating with that stairwell, is they would have had zone 1 and zone 2. But you can activate just one LED on the front of the panel. So yes, you can do that in that sort of circumstance. But yeah, it can't be one zone on two different panels, unfortunately. Hope that answers your question, bud. Like we discussed, we've got the problem here. We've got a duplicated zone. We don't, but at this moment in time, we've got a duplicated zone and panels are so on there. It could take me all day to find out where these duplications are because it's only just given me just some basic information. What I'm now going to show you is an option that we've got on our panels to help you out further in these types of scenarios. So what we've got is we've got an option in the top left-hand corner, which is an assistance menu. And the assistance menu gives us a few different options to help us out with our programming. Within the assistant menu, we're certainly going to go through a few of these options throughout the course. So that's the option that I'm going to show you a little bit later on, Mark, about converting your panels from 4,000 to 5,000. So that option is certainly in there. But the option that I want us to concentrate on first is the option to check the design. If we do option assistance and check design, what we can do is we can highlight our panels on site. We can check the design of this site. And what it does is it checks for each of these warnings and problems that we've been discussing. But this time, instead of it just saying that there's no location text and no device text and duplicated zones and everything, it now goes above and beyond. Because now what it says is it doesn't just say that there's no location text. It says that there's no location text on this device. And the one that I'm wanting to concentrate on now is the option for the problems that needs to be resolved. So what I would do is if I've got these problems come through, I check the design of my site and I review this report. I have a look to see where my problems are. So you can see I've got duplicated zones. We already knew that. But now what it's telling me is it's telling me which zone is duplicated. And what I can do is I can assess the situation. I can go, right, the zone that's duplicated is 1701. And 1701, as we discussed yesterday, represents the first panel on my network. And what I can do is I can go, right, yep, 1701, if that's my duplications, that should be on my node 1. So them problems aren't my issue. But what I can do is I can scroll down my list, I can have a look through the rest of my panels and review the same sort of information. So again, it's telling me that it's duplicated zone. It's telling me that it's 1701, which isn't correct for this particular panel. So I go, right, that's the one that I've got to resolve. But this time, what it tells me is where the duplications are. So you can see that it's telling me that it's the panel switch 1 that needs to be adjusted. And these reports can be downloaded, you can save them, you can print them off, you can do whatever you want with them. But like I said, we're just using them to help us out with these sort of situations. And once I know where the issue is, I can simply close down my report I can go to where it was referring to is my problem, and there we go. 1701 is used on both panels and need to make the necessary adjustments. And once I've made the adjustments, I can either go to the assistance menu and check the design again to make sure that everything has been resolved. And I can make sure that everything's correct now. So there we go, no further problems. Everything's good to go to send back into that panel. And all I need to do now that I've resolved the problems, communicate in, transfer from panel to PC, and allow the proceed option to take place. But there's one final thing that we've got to do when it comes to uploading into these panels. Because if I click proceed now, it's going to ask me which node number it is. But what's going to happen also, if I try and upload that in, the panel is not going to accept the information. So you can see there's my node 1, and there's my node looking for node 2. And what's going to happen is the panel's going to go into error because I don't have the panel in a specific mode of operation. So you can see the error message coming up there, which says not in access level PC config mode. And what would have been discussed on day one was Michael would have showed you the menu structure. And within the commissioning menu, we've got an option that's called PC config mode. The PC config mode is a way of telling the panel to accept the information from the PC. And again, it's all about covering your backs as much as possible. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start the communications again. And what I am going to tell you is, you know that local terminal option where I was showing you the screens from yesterday? That actual tool is actually built into this product also, but only works when the panel is in commissioning. And it's this little icon here. Normally you would do this through the front of the panel, but it's just to show you where I'm going for this. So if I want to upload this information into my panel, what I must do is go into the commissioning menu. And if I'm uploading in, what I need to do is I need to go to next menu. I need to go to PC config mode. And what you'll then see is the panel will then say that the PC link is ready to accept the information.
Could I ask a question? Which
Yes,
was the icon you used to bring that up then? I missed it.
To bring up this little screen.
Yeah.
When you're communicating, you get this little icon here, which is a little picture of your panel with a little.
Oh, right. Got it. Yeah, got it.
Remember, it'll only work when it's in commissioning.
Oh, I didn't know.
But we've got the local terminal,
Fair enough.
which works in both level 1, level 2, or level 3.
Yeah, I use the local terminal. That's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah, you can use it on here, yeah. So it's
Okay.
a nice little option that we've got in here. Helpful for things like your BMSs and your IP gateways where you don't have a display, that once it's in commissioning, just go through the menus using the config tool and you can use it the full time.
All right, excellent.
And once it's in the PC config mode, I just go through the same options again, proceed, and I can upload it in. And all I would do is I would click OK and it would send the information into that panel. I'm not going to click OK at this moment in time because it is a standalone panel and it's just going to go into fault and everything like that. But that's all we would need to do to upload in. Make sure that our panel is selected, make sure that the problems have been resolved, and then simply just click the OK command to send it all back into the panel. And another good thing about having all our panels on the network on here is if we've got these panels on site and we've downloaded them all in here, when it comes to uploading to the panel, it can fill in the blanks for the options for the network. So what we said was it doesn't matter how the panels have been wired, the node numbering must always be programmed in sequential order. So the lowest node must look for the next lowest node, regardless of how the panels have been wired. And what happens is the software is intelligent enough to assess the situation, see what nodes are involved, and then be able to adjust these features for us for when it comes to uploading into the panel. Is everyone okay with the upload download process now? Is everyone okay with that section at this moment in time?